Hello everyone, hope you're having a great day. Today we'll explore how James and Tu Diep choose to begin again after a crisis, not with words, but with their hands, rebuilding a chicken farm piece by piece into something meaningful. From broken fences to a living, breathing space, this journey shows how quiet determination can restore more than just land. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of their story. So let's start at the very beginning. The camera opens on a chicken farm sitting quietly on the side of a hill. From a distance, it almost looks peaceful. But once you step inside the gate, the reality becomes clear. The fences lean at awkward angles, the ground is uneven and packed hard with dirt, and the old chicken coops have clearly seen better days. Rust clings to the metal roofs, and the wood underneath tells a story of years without proper care. James and Tu Diep stand in the middle of the yard, not saying much at first. There's no dramatic dialogue here, no big emotional speeches, just silence. James slowly turns in a full circle, taking everything in, while Tu Diep walks off toward one corner of the farm, stopping to look closely at each area. James pulls out a small notebook and starts writing things down. Measurements, observations, ideas. Tu Diep checks the ground with her foot, presses her palm against a wooden post, and glances toward the chicken coops. You can feel it in their body language. They're not here to complain. They're not here to relive the past. Whatever crises they went through, it's not something they're talking about now. Instead, there's focus, a quiet kind of determination. This farm, in its current state, is where they've decided to start again. And the first step is simple, but not easy. Rebuild the chicken farm from the ground up. They move toward the old chicken coops together. Up close, the problems become even more obvious. The metal roof is covered in rust, with small holes that let rainwater drip inside. The floor is damp, uneven, and smells faintly of mold. The air inside feels heavy, with poor ventilation trapping heat and moisture. James pulls out a measuring tape and begins checking the dimensions of the coop. He looks up at the roof, then down at the walls, carefully noting everything. He checks where air might flow in and where it gets trapped. Tu Diep crouches down and presses her fingers against the floor, then watches how the chickens move around her. She notices which areas they avoid, which spots they gather in, and how easily they can reach food and water. Neither of them pretends this will be easy, but neither of them looks away from the problems either. They talk quietly, pointing out specific issues. The floor needs to be redone, the roof has to be replaced, walkways need to be clearer, and drainage has to be improved to keep the coop dry. This isn't about making things look nice. It's about creating a space where the chickens can actually stay healthy. Once they've inspected every corner of the old coop, they head back to a small wooden table near the house. The surface is rough and worn, but it's sturdy enough. James spreads out a large sheet of paper and starts sketching a new layout. Lines appear quickly as he divides the space into sections: feeding areas, resting zones, clear paths for cleaning and maintenance. Tu Diep leans over the table, studying the drawing. She suggests adding a natural free-range area nearby, a place where the chickens can move more freely during the day. She also points out that the chicks should have their own protected space, separated from the older birds. James nods, adjusts the sketch, and redraws certain sections. This moment feels different from earlier. There's more energy now. They're building something together, exchanging ideas, listening carefully to each other. No one is trying to take control. No one is shutting the other down. It's collaboration, plain and simple. The plan they're creating isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something better than what existed before. With a rough plan in place, they don't waste time. The next day begins with clearing out the old structures. The yard becomes busy with movement. James climbs up to remove sections of the damaged roof, carefully pulling down rusted sheets of metal. He stacks reusable wood to one side and sets aside anything that can't be saved. Tu Diep works nearby, sweeping dirt and debris, separating old materials into neat piles. Anything that can still be used gets cleaned and stored. Anything beyond repair is moved out of the way. The work is physically exhausting. Sweat builds quickly under the sun, and their movements slow as the hours pass, but neither of them stops. There's a rhythm to it. Lift, carry, clean, stack. Even when their arms get tired, they keep going. Every broken piece removed feels like a small step forward. They don't talk much during this part, but there's an unspoken understanding between them. This is necessary work. Hard, unglamorous, but essential. By the time the old coop is fully cleared, the space looks almost empty. Bare ground, open air. It doesn't look like much yet, but it feels full of possibility. James stands for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead, and looks at the cleared area. Tu Diep steps beside him, hands on her hips, breathing deeply. This is where the rebuilding truly begins. They start with the frame of the new chicken coop. Fresh wooden beams are measured, cut and lifted into place. James focuses on assembling the main structure, ensuring the frame is solid and stable. He checks angles, tightens joints, and makes sure everything lines up properly. Tu Diep works alongside him, stretching wire mesh across the frame and securing it carefully. She checks for gaps, making sure there's enough airflow without leaving openings that could let predators in. She moves methodically, testing the strength of each section before moving on. The work demands focus. Mistakes here would mean problems later, so they take their time. They communicate through short instructions and quick glances, adjusting when something doesn't fit quite right. When the door frame goes up, James installs it carefully, testing how it opens and closes. Tu Diep steps inside to check how the space feels, how light and air move through the structure. As the coop takes shape, the difference between the old and the new becomes clear. This one is open, clean, and thoughtfully designed. The layout allows for easier cleaning and better movement for the chickens. It's not fancy, but it's functional, and that's what matters. By the end of the day, the basic structure of the new coop stands firmly on the ground. They step back together and look at what they've built so far. There's dirt on their clothes and scratches on their hands, but there's also something else: satisfaction. This isn't just construction. It's a statement. After everything they've been through, they're choosing to build, to care, to start fresh in the most practical way possible. And this is only the beginning. The next phase of the work begins once the main structure is in place. With the frame of the new chicken coop standing strong, James and Tu Diep shift their attention to the surrounding land. Just beside the coop is an open patch of ground that hasn't been used properly in years. The soil is compacted, uneven, and scattered with small rocks. This area, they've decided, will become the free-range zone. James starts by setting up the new wooden fence. He measures the perimeter carefully, marking spots for posts before digging each hole by hand. The process is slow and repetitive, but precision matters here. Each post needs to be stable enough to withstand weather and keep the chickens safe. He lowers the posts into place, packs the soil tightly around them, and checks their alignment one by one. Meanwhile, Tu Diep works the ground inside the fenced area. She loosens the soil with simple tools, breaking up hardened patches and removing stones. Once the surface is more even, she begins spreading fresh soil and planting low grass and hardy plants that can survive constant movement from the chickens. She moves patiently, pressing soil down with her hands, making sure roots are properly covered. There's a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. Compared to the heavy demolition work from earlier days, this part feels lighter. There's still effort involved, but now the results are immediately visible. The empty patch of land slowly transforms into a space that feels alive, purposeful. When the fence is finished, James gives it a firm shake, testing its strength. Tu Diep walks the perimeter from inside, checking for gaps near the ground. They exchange a brief look and nod. It's solid. Back inside the coop, the focus turns to the feeding and watering system. James installs sturdy feeding troughs at a height that allows easy access for the chickens while keeping food off the ground. He secures each one firmly, ensuring they won't tip over or shift when the chickens gather around. Tu Diep adjusts the water containers, placing them in separate areas for chicks and adult chickens. She pays close attention to spacing, making sure no group has to compete too much for access. She crouches down, imagining the flow of movement inside the coop, and shifts one container slightly to avoid crowding. This stage requires a different kind of care. Every small decision affects daily life inside the coop. They move slowly, double-checking placements and making small adjustments until everything feels right. It's clear they're not just building a structure, but a system meant to function smoothly day after day. Early the next morning, the farm is quiet. A thin layer of mist hangs over the hill as the sun begins to rise. This is the moment they've been working toward, moving the chickens into their new home. James opens the gate to the old enclosure, guiding the chickens gently toward the new coop. He moves calmly, avoiding sudden gestures. Tu Diep walks ahead, keeping the path clear and watching how the birds respond. Some move forward quickly, curious about the new space, while others hesitate at first. They don't rush it. Each chicken is allowed to move at its own pace. As the birds step into the new coop, they pause, looking around, adjusting to the unfamiliar layout. Tu Diep watches closely, noting which areas attract them first. James stays near the entrance, ensuring none are left behind. Once inside, the chickens begin to explore. Some head straight for the feeding troughs. Others move toward the open, airy sections of the coop. A few wander toward the free-range area, stepping cautiously onto the newly planted ground. There's a quiet tension in the air as James and Tu Diep observe. This is the real test. Plans and construction only matter if the chickens can adapt comfortably. Minutes pass, then more. Slowly, the tension fades. The chickens settle. Movements become more natural. The space starts to feel lived in. Tu Diep lets out a small breath she didn't realize she was holding. James glances at her, and for the first time in a while, there's a hint of a smile. Over the next several days, their work continues, but in a different form. Now it's about observation and adjustment. Each morning, James records the number of chickens, their activity levels, and any signs of stress or illness. He notes how they use the space at different times of the day. Tu Diep focuses on the environment itself. She checks the floor for moisture, adding extra material where needed. She adjusts shade and cover, especially in areas where the chickens tend to rest. When she notices certain spots getting crowded, she subtly rearranges nearby elements to guide movement elsewhere. There's no rush. They understand that improvement is a process, not a single event. Some days require more work than others. Some adjustments don't work as expected and need to be changed again. Instead of frustration, they approach each issue with patience. As time passes, the transformation becomes undeniable. The coop stays cleaner. The chickens move more freely. Feeding times become calmer, with less competition. The free-range area shows signs of life as grass begins to take hold, even with constant use. One evening, as the sun sinks low over the hill, James and Tu Diep stand together near the edge of the farm. The light casts long shadows across the yard, now noticeably more organized and clean than before. The chickens settle into their routine, some returning to the coop, others lingering outside for a moment longer. Neither of them speaks at first. There's no need to. The quiet feels earned. This farm, once worn down and neglected, now feels steady again. Not perfect, not finished, but alive, functional, and moving forward. It represents something simple yet powerful, a choice to rebuild step by step without looking back at the details of the crises that came before. For James and Tu Diep, the chicken farm isn't just a project. It's a foundation, a place where effort turns into stability, where daily work brings visible results, and where the future feels manageable again. As the sky darkens and the last light fades, they turn back toward the house, leaving the chickens settled and calm behind them. Tomorrow, there will be more to do. There always is. But tonight, the farm stands quietly, restored in its own way, marking the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. After a period of crisis, James and Tu Diep return to a neglected chicken farm and decide to rebuild without dwelling on the past. They carefully inspect the old coops, noting damaged roofs, damp floors, and poor airflow, then create a practical plan focused on sustainability and animal care. Together, they clear debris, dismantle unusable structures, and construct a new, sturdy coop designed for cleanliness and comfort. They fence a free-range area, improve the soil, and install thoughtful feeding and watering systems. When the chickens move into their new home, James and Tu Diep patiently observe, record, and adjust the environment to support healthy routines. Over time, the farm becomes organized, calm, and functional again. More than a renovation, the restored chicken farm symbolizes a quiet new beginning, built through cooperation, persistence, and steady daily effort and shared hope forward.